So today it's a great privilege to be with you to think about the topic of person of peace. Now, when we often think about evangelism, I think where things tend to go wrong is we perceive it as a program more than a process or a relational situation. And I don't know about you, I feel uncomfortable doing hit and run type things. I mean, who wants to be sold something? And so it feels a bit slimy when we get on that end of things. But of course, that's a misrepresentation, a misunderstanding of how we are to be witnesses for Jesus. Jesus actually says something entirely different. He doesn't tell us to go and do a program. What he tells us is to look for the ones who are most open to Jesus things around us. So analogy he uses is, where are the fields white unto harvest around you right now? Change analogy. Where's the low-hanging fruit around you right now? Change analogy. Where are the open doorways for the gospel to go out around you? So this is what we want to think about today. And Jesus, unusually, he gives us some very specific strategic teaching on evangelism. Normally, he doesn't do strategic teaching. Lord's Prayer for prayer, and I think person of peace would be the two really classic examples where he does do this. And so we're going to be in Luke chapter 10. So if you've got a Bible, pull that out now. Luke chapter 10. We're going to start. It's the first kind of 12 verses, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to start in verse 5 of Luke 10, and it says this. These are the words of Jesus. When you enter a house, first say, peace to this house. If someone who promotes peace is there, your peace will rest on them. If not, it will return to you. Stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. Do not move around from house to house. So Jesus says, as we're going out into the world, as we're seeking to be on mission and going and making disciples, he says, what we do is when we encounter people, we bring a blessing. We say, peace to this house. Now, it's important to understand that when he says house, it could mean the physical building, but more likely, or I think certainly, he's referring to households. In other words, to networks of relationships. So as you go to your workplace or to your school or to your neighbors or to the people you play sport with, whatever it is you do with your life, to these networks of relationships, these households, the Bible word is oikos, Jesus says, greet them, and as you're interacting with them, listen to the response. So the greeting there is peace to this household. Now that's a kind of Jewishy greeting. If it's like saying shalom would have been the greeting at that time. And which for us is kind of like saying, hey, how are you? And of course, normally we don't listen to the response, but Jesus is saying, pay attention to the responses you get as you interact with them. Now, he's not saying literally that's the only phrase you can say, but it's illustrative of, as you engage with people, listen, pay attention to what's going on in their lives, and also listen to the Holy Spirit. It's a double listening that we're doing, because we bring the presence of Jesus through our words and our deeds and our presence. And then in verse 6, Jesus says, look for the person of peace. The NIV doesn't quite get the translation right. He says, if someone who promotes peace is there. It's a bit clunky. Literally, the Greek is, if there's a son of peace. Son of peace is a Greek idiom, which doesn't just mean guys. It means men and women, girls and boys. So hence we say the word person. But a person of peace is someone who, listen to this, a person of peace is someone who's not yet a Christian, but who welcomes the peace, the wholeness of God, the shalom that Jesus wants to bring into their lives. So it's like this. They like how Jesus looks in you. They appreciate how Jesus looks in you. You know, Jesus is so incredible. One of the things he does is the way he allows himself to be represented is through the unique prism of your personality, your culture, your interests, your accent. Not that I've got an accent, you've all got the accent. He will represent himself through that. And so some people will warm to one person, but not to the next person, and so on. So that means is as you go out to follow Jesus, some people will really warm to you. They'll welcome you. They'll receive Jesus in you, at first implicitly and then explicitly, as they realize you're a spiritual person, you're a follower of Jesus. They'll like that about you. And Jesus says, watch out, pay attention for those people, because they're probably your people of peace. Now, that also means not everyone is going to be your person of peace. Some people aren't interested. Maybe they don't connect with how Jesus looks in you. Maybe they're just not spiritually open at this time. And Jesus, as we'll see in a minute, says that's okay. Don't be nice, but focus on the ones who are open. Focus on where the fields are whitest unto harvest. Then in verse 7, he says this: stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. Do not move around from house to house, from household to household, from network to network. So what that means is Jesus is saying, focus in, go deep. Go deep with a few rather than scattergun with the many. We are doing incarnational mission. In other words, we incarnate, we represent what Jesus looks like in a depth of relationships. It's better to drill down deep with a few, because that's the way you're going to get more impact. And of course, that's what Jesus did with his earthly ministry. So that's a pretty good model for us to copy as well. We are not doing transactional relationships. We are doing incarnational relationships. Interestingly, he comments there, verse 7, about eating and drinking what they give you. Then in verse 8, whenever you enter a town and are welcomed, eat what's offered to you. He says it twice. And I love that fact, because what it shows is that a person of peace is going to be someone who serves you. They serve you. So there's a mutuality. There's a tendency I've noticed in Christians is that when we are in mission mode, we tend to go with a stance of, hey, you shut up and listen. I've got all the answers, which isn't very charming or gracious. And I don't think it's a very compelling message. I think Jesus is far more gracious and invitational than that. And of course, if we start with the end in mind, if the end is we want to make making disciples, then yeah, it should be a mutual two-way giving. So pay attention to lost folks who want to serve you. And there's a two-way authentic relationship there. That for us has often been a key sign of someone who might be a person of peace for us. And then he says just a couple of other things just to wrap up here. Verse 9, heal the sick who are there and tell them the kingdom of God has come near you. So like many, many other occasions, when Jesus sends the disciples out and sends us out, he says, heal the sick, often normally drive out demons, sometimes raise the dead. But we're to go in these naturally supernatural ways. And he says, as you do that, proclaim the gospel, say the kingdom has come amongst you right now. So let's not negate the supernatural aspect of how we engage with our people of peace. We'll come back to the moment. And then in verse 10 and 10 through 12, he says, if you go to a town, you're not welcomed, you take off your shoes, you dust them off against that town as a witness to them. And I think there's lots of ways you could interpret that. But the way I would process that today for us is it's really Jesus saying, not everyone is going to be your person of peace. Don't take it personally. Unless you're being a moron. All right, but hopefully you're not. So don't take it personally. Be nice, but focus on the ones who are open. Focus in, go deep with the ones who are open. So let's summarize all this. And I've actually got 5 bullet points, 5 super short phrases that I would say. Here's how we would define a person of peace. So person of peace is, the starting place, by the way, is a person of peace is not yet a Christian. They are not a believer. The principle does apply to Christians when you're thinking about people opening up doorways of favor or opportunity. But right now, we're talking about evangelism. We're talking about being witnesses. So thinking of people we know who are not yet saved, but Jesus says 5 things. A person of peace will be someone who welcomes you, someone who receives Jesus in you. Now, at first, it might be implicit, but they like the Jesus bit of you. That's the second thing. Welcomes you, receives Jesus in you. Thirdly, serves you. Fourthly, they let you intentionally invest in them. They let you invest in them. This is important. Jesus says, don't move around from house to house or household to household. In other words, go deep. Invest in these people, see what happens as you pray with them, as you read the Bible with them, as you talk about spiritual things with them, as they get to see your life up close. Go deep with them. And then the final thing, the 5th thing about a person of peace is they authenticate you. In other words, they become a gatekeeper into their network of relationships. So they will say to someone else in the neighborhood or another guy at work, they'll say, hey, have you met so-and-so? I really like them. They're awesome. And that person then thinks, oh, I'd like to meet you. And they're open to you when they encounter you. And implicitly, they're going to be more open to the fact that you carry Jesus with you. And so that is Jesus's strategy for how we go on mission, how we go and be effective in evangelism. So let me give you an illustration of this for you. So a number of years ago, we moved to Ohio. And we did the schoolboy era of moving in January when it was absolutely freezing cold and there's snow on the ground and all the rest of it. And so everyone's in the houses. It's very hard to get to know neighbors. And we're a week or 2 in and it snowed heavily. And one of the boys, my sons, runs into me and says, Daddy, there's some man snow blowing our driveway. So I go outside and introduce myself, and it's our next door neighbor, Ron. And he said, "I just wanted to welcome you, and I figure you might not have a snowblower yet." And he cleared our drive for us, and we got to know him, invited us around, so him and his wife Betsy and their kids, and we just became great friends. They were so kind to us, that they'd invite us to be with family events and do Thanksgiving, but they opened up the whole neighborhood for us. They introduced us to lots of people. They kind of, in a good way, gossiped about us to other neighbors, and they were like really keen to meet us. And at the beginning, they weren't believers. But a couple of years in, just out of relationships and time with people, we were able to start a missional community or microchurch in that neighborhood. Saw heaps of kingdom fruit, people coming to faith, people coming close to Jesus. And these two were at the heart of it all. So for us, they were people of peace in that situation. So one last thing I want to say, then I'm going to give you your challenge. So this is a strategy that is all over the New Testament. I could get into double figures very easily to think of examples of this, of the disciples or the early church doing this. So here's a few classic examples. You've got the woman at the well in John 4, and she goes and gets all the community, says, "Come and see the man who knew everything about me." You've got Zacchaeus in Luke 19, and all his tax collector friends get impacted by Jesus, and of course he's generous back to the townspeople. If you go to Acts 16, there's two of them. So you've got Lydia and her household, who are the first converts in the continent of Europe. And then you have later the Philippian jailer and his household, his oikos. Again, it's that network of relationships that he opens up as he encounters Jesus. Another example would be Acts 10, Cornelius, and it's a definitely non-biological household that he pulls together. If you read the text, that's what it says. And they get saved and impacted. So there's lots of these examples in the Bible. It was a strategy that the early church used super successfully. And so I will propose that this is a strategy that we need to start using. And so my takeaway question for you is very simple. Who is your person of peace? Who is your, or plural, who are your people of peace right now? Because you can have multiple. Who are the people of peace in your life right now? So think about where you live, where you work, where you learn, where you play. Think about those circles. Who are the people of peace around you? You've got some proximity to, so I don't mean like they live 3 states away. I mean they live close to you, so you can engage with them in everyday life. Who could be your people of peace? If you're not sure, this is something to be praying about. This is something to be asking Jesus about. So Jesus, would you show me who these people of peace are? You can use that little 5-point list I gave you to start to process that. If you're married, talk with your spouse, or talk with an accountability partner to brainstorm through who some of these people might be. Because I'm convinced that unless you're a complete hermit, you have people of peace in your life, just perhaps not realized it yet. And certainly these are relationships that you can cultivate and go after. So who is your person of peace at this time? And start to pray that the Lord would open up more opportunities to witness to them, to come alongside, to love them, to pray for that, to pray, not just pray for them, but pray with them. Be able to say, can I pray for you about the situations of life that they're processing? And you demonstrate the validity of the gospel as they have personal encounters with Jesus themselves through you. So that's the path we want you to take. I hope that's super useful. And God bless you as you step into this wonderful task of looking for our people of peace and helping them encounter Jesus for themselves. So to help you move forward, 2 quick things I want to let you know about that we want to offer to you. So firstly, there is a free ebook that I wrote a few years ago. It's called The Viral Gospel, and it has a much fuller explanation of person of peace, goes deeper into the scriptures, has some application points that I think you'll find super useful. So I'm going to post a link to that here, so you can get hold of that. It's on our website on dandelionresourcing.com. So please get hold of that, download it. It's free. Happy for you to share that with other people. That's the first thing. Second thing, Hannah and I created a course called SOW, which stands for Season of Witness. And that's a 7-part process where we teach and coach you in just practical steps, 7 very, very down-to-earth practical steps that help you and your group and or your church to be going out on mission in ways that just feel really achievable, but also will make an impact. It's a lot of fun, but one of those steps is looking for your person of peace. So within that course, we give a long teaching there, and there's lots of equipping and resourcing in there, but it's also part of the bigger story. So again, I'll give you a link to that. I think that might be a resource that you would really benefit from studying. It gives you there's handouts and there's group work you can do and all sorts of stuff. So it's a very easy plug and play resource. So that might be something to consider. But the main thing is that you get into living this lifestyle of looking for your people of peace and investing deeply into their lives.